Hello and welcome to the Kyiv Post podcast with me, Rahim Rahemtulla. Today we bring you the highlights from the July 14th edition of the newspaper. We'll be discussing the defiant stance being taken by the CEO of Ukraine's state rail company. And in the business section, we take a look at the controversy surrounding Ryanair's announcement that it is pulling out of Ukraine. But first, a review of the visit this week to Kyiv by top-level EU officials as part of a Ukraine-EU summit. The big news was that European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said that he had been persuaded by Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko that Ukraine does not need an anti-corruption court, which was something that officials in the West had been pushing for quite a long time. So bringing us the reaction to this is staff writer Olena Goncharova. Olena, thank you for joining us. You were at the summit. The fact that the EU has dropped this demand for an anti-corruption court has angered civil society groups. But why? Why has there been such a big reaction?
Hello, Rahim. Thanks for the invitation. And what I can say is that basically what the EU officials did yesterday would not help Ukraine to reform its corrupt judiciary system. That's why it was a big outcry yesterday among civil society and some watchdogs, because they thought that the creation of this anti-corruption court is important, because only when Ukraine will have this, it will help to prosecute top-level officials.
Mm-hmm. But the fact that Juncker said he had been persuaded that instead of the court, we could have a panel of anti-corruption judges who would work within the Supreme Court. But again, many people say this is not a good alternative. This is not going to work. So why is that?
Well, that's right, because the biggest problem is that this anti-corruption panel within the Supreme Court would not be independent. The idea of anti-corruption court was to recruit independent and competent judges, and this recruitment process would be completed by foreigners. So by independent body, not within Ukrainian judiciary system. The competition for the Supreme Court is still going on, but it already has been discredited a lot, because as many as 70% of the judges who got in are incumbent judges, and as we all know, some of them were already involved with different scandals. And another problem is that this whole process lacked transparency, because the High Qualification Commission of the judges did not publish all the information about the candidates on their website.
So several potential issues there with this new panel. But going back to the summit more generally, was there also good news? Did the EU officials have anything nice to say?
Yes, the EU officials actually praised Ukraine for its efforts in trade and public procurement reform. And also they said that finally Ukraine secured visa-free travel to the Schengen zone, and already more than 100,000 Ukrainians traveled visa-free to the European countries. And Jean-Claude Juncker himself said that it's a good chance for all Ukrainians to fall in love with Europe.
Well, Ukrainians falling in love with Europe. Europe perhaps not quite in love with Ukraine at the moment, but the relationship goes on. Olena, many thanks for joining us here on the podcast.
Thank you.
That was Olena Goncharova on the EU-Ukraine summit. We turn now to our interview with Wojciech Balczun, the under-fire CEO of Ukraine's state rail monopoly, Ukrzaliznytsia. My colleague Denis Krasnikov and I were working on this story, and Denis joins me now. Denis, Balczun has been in the job for a year. That was his probationary period. He doesn't know for sure if he's going to be able to stay in the job. That's going to depend on if he can win the approval of the cabinet of ministers. For now, he stays in the post. He says he wants to stay to see out his contract, but he has had a lot of criticism in his first year, especially from the infrastructure minister, who says that he's basically done nothing to fight corruption at Ukrzaliznytsia. What was his response to the detractors?
Wojciech Balczun thinks that this year is not enough for him to demonstrate good financial results and technical results. He didn't have enough time to build the perfect basis for further improvements of Ukrzaliznytsia. And he says it's just too early to judge him.
What was your impression of Balczun? He said, as you say, he started lots of things. He needs time for reforms. Do you think that's a valid excuse? Do you think he's the man for the job, really? I mean, it's a huge job.
Well, it's a tough question, and it's difficult to judge a person. What is certain is that he's not the man who people in Ukraine used to see on such posts like Ukrzaliznytsia CEO. And his predecessors were notoriously corrupt, and he's not like this. At least that's what people from Poland, his former co-workers, colleagues told the Kyiv Post about him. I think that the next year, if he stays in this job, will show his advantages and disadvantages fully. And now it's really not the high time to judge him.
We couldn't talk about Balczun, Dennis, without mentioning that he plays in a rock band. I mean, this gets mentioned everywhere where you see any article about him. And he said to us that he's been a victim of a black PR campaign. Do you think he's right about that?
People judge him by his rock band, but it's not the thing. It's just his hobby. It's something he does over the weekends. People just label him with rock star or rock singer. But at the same time, we don't call a person who likes fishing a fisherman. I think people they need to get rid of all the prejudice about him and just let him work. By the way, the black PR is not only about his rock band, it's also about his financial results. Infrastructure Minister Omelan says that all the financial results that were presented by Ukrzaliznytsia don't show anything. And I partly agree with that, because we know that 60 Ukrzaliznytsia tenders were blocked by some other companies. Balczun named MaxMed International. We couldn't reach them. I think it's, there is a story in that, and there is someone who's interested in blocking Balczun's tenders. So coming back to financial results, when such a big company as Ukrzaliznytsia cannot reinvest money, and they keep this money inside the company, not renewing the locomotives or wagons and the railways and so on and so forth. It's difficult to look at the financial results and to find whether they really profit or not. They just cannot spend money. Probably that's why Ukrzaliznytsia showed a positive result in 2017. We know that, judging by the last 5 months, they profited $4 million. It's not too much, but it's something, because a year ago, during the same period, they lost more than $100 million. So it's a huge, huge, huge step further.
What has he actually said that he's done in his first year? What are the reforms that he wants to make at Ukrzaliznytsia?
That's an interesting question. Well, what he said is that he's trying to form the foundation of the company, try to change something there so that he can build on it. And when he was asked about it, he said that he doesn't want to lose this job right now. He doesn't want someone to take over his post right now to see the results. And the results will be, they will be tied to another person, not him. At the same time, he claims that he's done the dirtiest work in Ukrzaliznytsia. The work that will bring results only in a couple of years. It's it's not certain whether we should believe him or not. Time will show, but that's what we have now.
So it sounds like, Dennis, you do have some sympathy for Balczun. You feel like we perhaps shouldn't be so quick to judge. He's had a year, maybe 2 more in the making. But for today, that's where we'll have to leave it. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That was Denis Krasnikov on Wojciech Balczun, the CEO of Ukrzaliznytsia. And finally, on today's programme, Ryanair. The low-cost airline announced on July 10th that it has pulled out of Ukraine and will not launch here in October as planned. Analysts say that this is a huge blow to Ukraine's reputation and the investment climate in general. Well, to tell us more is staff writer Weronika Melkazyorova. She joins me now. Weronika, what were Ryanair's complaints? Why did they make this U-turn and decide to exit Ukraine?
So, David O'Brien, Ryanair's chief commercial officer, explained that Ryanair decided to exit Ukraine because of Boryspil Airport. Ukrainian state-owned enterprise, the Boryspil Airport, is protecting the interest of high-priced carriers, especially Ukrainian International Airlines, a company that belongs to Igor Kolomoisky, Ukrainian oligarch. But Pavlo Ryabikin, the director of Boryspil Airport, told journalists that it's not quite true because what actually happened is that Ryanair demanded a lot from Ukrainian airport.
Well, tell us that, because there is another side to this story. It's perhaps not as black and white as it seems. I mean, Ryanair are notoriously aggressive when it comes to entering new markets. They make a lot of demands. And so what role did that play in this whole saga?
What I think that here we have not like greedy Ukrainians, greedy corrupt Ukrainians to blame like for an international number one low cost not entering Ukraine. Here we have like a clash of the titans. Ryanair, aggressive style. Basically Ryanair always come and say to the airport, we bring you passengers and you make money on them. For Ukraine, they promised 500,000 passengers, new passengers, every year. That's quite a lot because now, in general, we have 9 million passengers a year in Ukraine. But for that, Ryanair demanded a lot, and the demands were unacceptable for Ukrainian airport. It was 35% of duty-free income, $7 per passenger tariff, as opposed to $13 per passenger, and especially for Ryanair, enter into Ukraine, infrastructure ministry agreed to decrease the tariff of $17 per passenger that we used to have to $13. But that wasn't enough for Ryanair. They also demanded tax-free island navigation, tax-free registration counters, tax-free parking space, allocation of land for construction of a hotel on the airport's territory, and the arbitration of all disputes in London courts, not in Ukrainian courts.
What do you think? I mean, that's obviously a very long list of demands. As far as consumers are concerned, they would have liked to have seen Ryanair in the Ukrainian market because they would have got cheaper tickets. But there are other budget airlines like Wizz Air which do operate in Ukraine. So if they can do it, you might ask, well, why can't Ryanair find a way as well? And I think, Veronica, what do you think? The question I think at the end here is, does Ryanair need Ukraine or does Ukraine need Ryanair? What do you think on that?
I think they both need each other because European low-cost airlines now are searching for new markets. Ryanair is interested in Ukraine, and to prove that, I can say that while we are speaking here, there are some new stories connected to Ryanair in Ukrainian press. Ryanair came back to Lviv. Lviv is another major and very important city in western Ukraine. When Ryanair first announced going to enter into Ukrainian market, it promised only 4 new routes from Kyiv, but 7 new routes from Lviv. So Lviv is more important.
So there's some new negotiations going on, you think?
Yeah. And also Boryspil Airport just announced that they decided to renew negotiations with Ryanair. So the blow to Ukrainians' reputation for foreign investments, it was all done to get the maximum for each side of the conflict. Ryanair wanted maximum, and Boryspil also wanted maximum. So
maybe not the end of the story yet. We may see Ryanair coming into Ukraine. Well, Veronica, that's where we'll have to leave it today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That was Veronika Milkazyrova on the Ryanair scandal here in Ukraine. And on that note, that's where we'll have to wrap things up this week. Remember, if you want to read any of the stories we've been discussing, you can do so at our website, kyivpost.com. Until next week, from me and my producer, Anna Yakutenko, goodbye.